Hello, this is Ryan Lester. Welcome to this week's episode of CXNext Live. For those of you that may be joining for the first time, this is a weekly series we do on the world of customer experience, focused on helping folks like yourselves out there better understand what's going on in the world of customer experience, better identifying trends, opportunities, and learning from real-world practitioners. This is a weekly series we do, and we're here to help all of you out there. We're obviously in a very challenging time. So much going on in the world, changing the way we live, changing the way we work. And so it's great to spend some time, learning from others, reflecting on market research, and really finding ways to improve your customer and employee experience. For those of you that may have not joined in a few weeks, as you can see, I have a beard, going for the stay-at-home look for a couple of weeks. Not sure why I grew it in the summer, but certainly it's a different look and fun to mix things up as I'm home every single day. So great to have you here. We're going to spend some time today focusing on the world of visual engagement. As things have shifted and employees are engaging in new ways, and customers are engaging in new ways, there really is a new need that's emerged to really accelerate many of our digital transformation trends and digital transformation efforts. So what we're going to spend our time today on is really talking about how visual engagement, so using things like sharing a customer's screen or sharing a customer's camera, are ways that you can get closer to your customers in these trying times. What used to be easy of, sending an employee to a customer's home or telling someone to come into your physical store, many times that's not possible these days. And customers really don't want it. They want to have that distance. They want to be able to get things done on their own. And so a technology or the trends around visual engagement can really help to accelerate ways you can stay close to your customers, but doing it in this social distancing world. And obviously for many of us, this is going to be the case for at least the next few months as the economy slowly reopens, but still consumers are going to be hesitant, but at the same time, really expecting a high quality experience. So looking forward to our discussion today. The flow is I'm going to bring in two great guests. They're going to share some of the insights we've been doing, both from a market research perspective and also from some of the work we're doing here at LogMeIn ourselves around visual engagement. So looking forward to digging into those topics. It'll be a free-form discussion. Feel free to ask questions. We'll certainly follow up with those at a later time. But we really want to make this an opportunity for you to learn about some of these new trends and take advantage of them as you're out trying to deliver a better customer experience in these challenging and changing times. So with that said, without further ado, I'm excited to invite Marie and Kat. Welcome to Marie and Kat. Great to have you both here. Looking forward to our time talking today.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here for the first time.
So before we start, it's always great to give a little context. It's great I know you both very well, but obviously great to get a little perspective of your roles and maybe one thing as we start out that you're really excited about and what you've been doing in the world of visual engagement. Kat, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a product manager here at LogMeIn, and I'm leading the charge for one of our net new co-browse solutions, Rescue Live Guide. So I'm working really closely with the engineers and scoping out those requirements and also working on the front line with customers and translating certain things into values for customers. And I'd say one thing I'm really excited about is just basically based on the fact that I think with the COVID-19 situation that we're in, that the need for visual engagement has been amplified. I think it was always there in some ways, and there was always a need to improve your experience on a website or whatever it might be. But now for a lot of businesses, it's actually no longer a nice to have, but a must have as we kind of navigate these uncertain times. So it's been really exciting to be able to provide that sort of value and help to organizations who are in dire need for something like that today.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's almost like, you rewind to the 2000s and, you're a company and you don't have a website and people are like, what are you crazy? And then you fast forward to the 2010s and it's like, oh, you don't have a mobile app? What are you crazy? And now we're in a world where it's like, you don't have ways to engage with your consumers. You're not leveraging a technology like, camera sharing or screen sharing to get close to those customers who want to engage with you. So I think there's been these kind of monumental events that have happened that really change the way consumers behave and the way businesses engage. And it's unfortunate that it had to be a pandemic, but certainly I think this is really driving a mind shift change and transforming the way companies engage with their consumers. That's really good comment to start us off today. And Marie, what about yourself? Introduce yourself and your role, and also talk a little about what you've been excited about in the work you've been doing in visual engagement.
Sure, great. Thanks for having me. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Customer Engagement and Support Solutions at LogMeIn. I partner a lot with Kat closely and the rest of the product management team to understand buyer needs and to help us as we evolve our solutions portfolio to expand beyond traditionally what we have focused on, which were connected devices like your computer or your mobile phone, and really to help bridge into larger support experiences or customer experiences for disconnected devices, whether that's your keyboard or your monitors or your refrigerator, as well as website experiences like navigating on a website using co-browsing technology. So it's been an exciting journey. I've spent the last 6 months partnering very closely with Forrester Research on a comprehensive global market study to understand buyer needs, customer experience leaders in particularly, around how the tools they're looking to invest in for amplifying the customer experience, and notably how they're investing in visual engagement technology to do that. And I think it's really exciting, and we'll talk about it more today, just how this study that we conducted was actually pre-pandemic, and it really showed a strong gravity towards investing or increasing investment in visual engagement tools to create a richer and more authentic customer experience.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what's interesting just to that point is that this is not a trend that just happened overnight. Just like you said, we started in the world of how do we better support devices? How are we connecting to devices to better manage them? Then we said, well, how do we connect to peripherals? And how are we connected to mobile devices? And so this is just really that next step in that evolution of, it's not just kind of working behind the scenes to connect to those devices, but now how are we front and center engaging those consumers? And once again, the trend was there before all these changes happened with the pandemic. It's just really put an accelerant into it. It's gone from being this is interesting, we're excited to learn more, to now being, now saying this is front and center. How do we put these tools in the hands of our employees to help them deliver that better experience no matter where the consumer is? So I think that's a great kind of level, a way to kick us off in our discussion today. So thank you for that. So we've talked a lot. So let's kind of once again explore a bit of the current state. I started off and talked about how the world has changed, how the way we work has changed, the way we engage with our consumers has, and a lot of that now is driven by the pandemic. It's been driven by COVID-19, with contact centers changing where employees work, with things changing around how consumers are engaging and the channels they're engaging with. So I'm interested in digging into that a little further because I think there's lots of factors. So Kat, let's start with you. What are some of the biggest drivers that we're seeing or changes, the external factors in how customers get support these days in this kind of post-COVID world?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for some people, it's really about that concierge white glove service that their customers are used to expecting. And that typically happens in person. Recently, I started working with a benefits insurance company, and they typically provided a lot of benefits for people in the education and public sector space. And the way they did this was actually going on site into the schools, for example, and sitting side by side with the teachers and the staff and helping them fill out those applications. They're quite comprehensive. There are a lot of pages. There's a lot of difficult jargon. So it really requires that side to side. Obviously, in the world in which we're living right now, that's no longer possible. And to be honest, I'm not really sure when people would feel comfortable having these sales reps come back into schools. So with that, their business was kind of really halted, and they had a need to complete these applications, and they were actually never doing them online. There was no virtual experience there. So it's been really interesting to see how they've had to pivot. And now they're working on us with a live pilot. And again, this goes beyond customer experience. Obviously, that's a part of it, but this is more of a necessity. In order to ensure that those applications are completed and that the customer has a good experience and they understand, they're able to use a tool like CoBrowse to really visually guide the customer, and they can go through it together so that the person filling it out isn't really disjointed from that experience. There's a lot of personal factors and decisions to make in terms of your finances and what you want. So you don't want someone to just fill that out on your behalf. You very much want to be involved and see all those different steps. So it's been really interesting to see a use case like that, which again was typically in person, and they've kind of shifted to something like CoBrowse to really allow their business to continue in a time like this.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful example. And I think also what people, too often assume or get hung up on is that this is all about companies that are already way down the road on digital transformation. So it's like, oh, this is for tech companies or only for telcos who maybe have invested a lot in digital already and omnichannel. And I think that's actually not the case at all. Oftentimes, there's many parts of businesses, even very mature businesses, technically mature or companies that have a mature engagement model, where there's things that are legacy systems or processes, to your point, that maybe were very in-person dependent, and they're still critical processes, but they were never really prioritized to be digital first because they didn't need to be, or they were better done in person. And so I think what companies should think about is, even if you're in a paper world or in a world where many of your systems still live in legacy ERP systems, those can still really be transformed because a lot of other things have evolved. Browsers have become more modern. A lot of these don't require, and we'll talk about this more later, but require you to download things. So I think even if you have legacy systems that were very, paper-based or in-person based, they can take a dramatic leap through these technologies because they are very accessible and usable by both for the user, easy to use for them, and also for your internal employees. So I think that's a great example. Thanks for starting us off there. And so for Marie, what about for you? What are some things that you think are kind of those driving factors that are changing the way people work, that are accelerating things like visual engagement in this kind of COVID-19 world?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things come to mind. You talked a little bit about processes that had been manual and in person before that could potentially be digitized. And then there's some circumstances that the physical presence is almost 100% requirement. So case in point, about a month ago, we talked to National Seating and Mobility. And so they provide products and services to assist people who are living independently and reliant upon wheelchairs and other accessibility devices. They had embraced our LiveLens camera sharing product so that their technicians could do some pre-screen and evaluation of equipment before they would actually have to go, which they physically, in most cases, had to go on site with the customer to fix their machine. But they were able to pre-screen and actually, as a result, improve that customer experience by reducing their cycle times by 10 days. That their intent to use camera share was just part of a larger customer experience strategy. It wasn't predicated by COVID and the pandemic, but once the pandemic hit, they pumped the gas on it and accelerated that pre-screening, doing it through camera sharing to 100% of their service installations. And then secondly, I think the other field service example is we've all had to, at some point or another, have our Wi-Fi or have the cable company come to our house. And as both of you know, our dear friend in our department recently purchased her first home, which was, it's an incredible life experience for someone. It's a huge life event. And as a remote worker, like the rest of us, she had to get her Wi-Fi up and running fast. So it was really critical to her ability to work to have that service. But the technician literally had to come. He was wearing his mask. They are not allowed into homes. He had to pass her whole setup for cable, her router, her modem on like a plank and pass it through the kitchen window and then like scream instructions to her while she was setting it up in the other room. So you can imagine, they worked together because they had to get the job done, but you can imagine that's not really the ideal customer experience that this service provider is looking to deliver. And God only knows what they would have done if Lisa lived on the 5th floor instead of the 1st floor. So in a situation like that, being able to use camera sharing to stream in and have her show like, okay, well, here's my cable modem outlet or whatever, and have that person to be able to provide visual cues on her mobile phone to say, step 1, put the HDMI cord here. Now, step 2, do this, and provide a visual walkthrough that would make it feel like they were standing shoulder to shoulder, even though it was more like sidewalk to shoulder.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And I know she sent us pictures that we were really, we'll post them, I'll show those pictures.
Yeah.
But they were great. And I think it's funny, I always love think of similarities of, be like your pizza person delivering the pizza, but it's just like the dough and the cheese and the sauce, and then they're like yelling from the car, all right, so you got to flatten it out and stick it in the oven. It's just like, no one would put up with that. Something that used to be required to be in person, or actually still is required to be in person, we're leveraging these new technologies to not make it a terrible experience where you're having to shout through a window to someone for something that, these companies have to do every day. Telcos, service providers, every day are interacting with these customers to set up these services. And so how do we take this technology to not make that a horrendous experience for both the technician, the person who's trying to accomplish the work, and then also the end customer? So I think it seems like with both of you, there's all these wonderful examples of where we're accelerating how companies interact with customers. We're tackling problems that are real world challenges that aren't going to go away. And we're doing it in a way that's innovative. And actually, at the end of the day, probably will be better for the consumer, because who wants to wait around their house for a technician to show up when instead they can just send you a box and say, hey, when you're ready, we'll connect you with that person back at headquarters who can visually walk you through that process. So I think those are all really great grounding points on the core challenges that we're seeing with COVID-19 and the opportunity in front of us with technology like visual engagement. So I guess I'm interested in talking more around, as people are continuing to adapt, what are other things that we're helping them with? I guess as customer expectations are changing, how is that work shifting, and what do customers care about? I guess, what are they looking for, and how is visual engagement solving those challenges? Maybe we'll go back to you, Kat, and get your perspective on this.
Yeah, I'd say for a lot of them, it's really driving the need for a purpose-built solution, because I think at this point, not everyone was necessarily prepared to work from home, and they have a lot of tools in their tool belt, so to speak, and they're just kind of pulling out whatever they can to get by. We've had a number of customers come to us and realize that the tools that they were using aren't necessarily working. So just thinking of someone who might even be using a collaboration tool, but that wasn't necessarily ideal when you're filling out an application and there's a need for, masking of personal or private data and things like that. So I think it's been interesting where prior to COVID, maybe things were a little bit more acceptable because you could get by in person or with other tools. But now that this is the sole way of communicating and getting things done, I think there are higher standards that need to be met. From a security standpoint, but also beyond, and really making sure that, again, both parties are there to kind of reinforce that muscle memory of the end user so that they can learn how to do it going forward, as opposed to just sitting back and letting someone take over and do it for you.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things you touched on there that are really important. One is, and the last thing you just said, which I'll bring up first, is how this also can help drive the behavior around self-service. So at the end of the day, people often like doing things for themselves, mostly because of convenience and the fact that sometimes they feel like they can get done faster. So this also reinforces empowering the customer to help them solve their own problem, or maybe get through the problem faster. And I think that's a really important point. And there's so many things we used to be dependent on for other people that now we do ourselves. So, whether it be like booking, a reservation, or, even, moving around our money, so we have to call the bank and make a transaction. Now all those things we're empowered to do ourselves as consumers. So I think that's a really great example. And then the other thing I think that's important that you're mentioning is that there's already so much friction that's being put into the system. So, doing simple things, like even just going to the ATM used to be easy. Now often there's a lot of friction involved. So as we're introducing these new technologies, we want them to be very frictionless or very easy to adopt. And I think your point's a really good one of, in many cases, we might be able to do this with a different type of tool or a general purpose tool, but often it's going to be hard and arduous and may not be secure and may create a lot of friction for both the agent, the employee, and the customer. So where we're introducing these, how are we addressing that customer effort to make it simple and easy and fast? Because once again, people are already overburdened and exhausted and feeling like they're doing too much. So I think that's a really important point as well, as we're looking to attack these challenges. How are we doing it in a way that's really driving down the effort by the customer to almost nothing? That's great. And then what about for you?
I would add on to that, Ryan.
Yeah.
I would add on to that, Ryan, that when we did the Forrester study, that was really the top finding, is really, as businesses are looking to adopt visual engagement technology to improve the customer experience, they're looking to address two primary issues. They want to create the most effortless experience possible for the customer, and they want to do it in a way that they can create trust between the customer and the representative. They cited that as the top 2 issues. And the biggest struggle they find is with the visual engagement tools that they have today, is requiring the end user or the customer to download or install some kind of application. You talked about friction, and traditionally in those types of experiences, downloading and installing an app is a huge friction point, because a lot of people just aren't tech savvy enough to understand how to get into an app store, navigate and find it. And agents spend a numerous amount of time trying to walk them through that process. So they're spending half their average handle time talking about how to install an app versus actually getting to the root problem of what they're there to address.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up. And I even think we can all relate to this of, we don't really, oftentimes we don't want to download an app if we're only going to use it once. And in many of these scenarios, this might be a one-time thing. So going back to your Comcast example, we lived in this house for 6 years. I'm not interacting with Comcast on a daily basis. And now they're like, oh, we want you to download an app and install this. And people have different devices. And not everyone's super tech savvy. So I think that's a great example of where, if they're already trying to solve a problem and frustrated, and now you're putting another hurdle in front of them that doesn't even feel like it's solving the problem, that's not great from a customer experience perspective. And it's also hard for the employee, because now they're, to your point, spending half their time just setting up to solve the problem, and the customer is doing a lot of the work. So I think that's a really good point of, as we're thinking about this and leveraging this technology, how do we make it easy for everybody involved? So once again, we focus on solving the problem, not setting up a system to solve the problem.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that is I think it's really important to solve a problem holistically. And what I mean by that is not only is it super important for the end user to not have to download anything, whether that's an extension or an EXE, but also thinking about the agent and then ramp it up and them not having any issues either or beyond that. So if we look at some visual engagement tools, including our own co-browse, I'm really excited to say that we don't actually have to add any code to the website. And the reason that's so important is not everyone has a web team or dedicated resources. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to get so many pilots up and running is to being able to also not just empower the end user, but the actual employee in their organization. They might not have necessarily the budget for PS, or they might not have the time to get a web team to be able to do it. So I also think it's about easing that burden for the actual organization just to get this technology up and running as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what you made me think of there too, another exciting thing about this is that, oftentimes technology, larger companies can have an advantage in the sense that they have bigger budgets, they have more resources. To your point, they might have dedicated web folks. What's really nice about this technology is that really any size company can leverage it, because to your point, it doesn't require a lot of development work. It doesn't require you to already have an app that maybe the user has installed. So there's a number of things that now kind of are leveling the playing field. And I think, in this current environment where, there's economic strain on many companies, it's hard for small businesses sometimes to feel like they can keep up. And this can be a technology that anybody can adopt. It's something that you're buying a seat for an employee, they're leveraging it. So it's not something that is a huge investment for your organization around professional services or implementation effort. So I think that's another really important point, that this, once again, is kind of a democratization of easy access to your customers, easier ways to solve problems, and getting closer to your customers in this really challenging social distance world. So I'm really glad you brought that up. A couple of things I want to spend some time on. So we talked through examples around what used to be in person and moving that to now being social distanced. We talked about a telco example. Are there some other industry examples, I think, that you guys would like to highlight that we're seeing real success that can kind of bring this to life? I'd be happy to have either of you answer that if you want to touch on some.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say we're seeing a lot of momentum in the financial sector as a whole. And I think this obviously predated COVID as well, but I think when we talked about earlier that need for security and privacy, that's critical for these banks for a lot of different reasons. One, they want their customers, their end users, to feel secure, but also for their own organizations. If you think about compliance and fraud and things like that, that's critical to them too. Maybe not the individual agent, but their organization at large. So I've definitely seen a lot of need for something like this. And I think it comes down to the fact that there's different things that you can do online, whether it's selling stocks or trying to complete an application. And again, these are big decisions. They tend to be quite complex. And I think there's definitely a need to have someone visually guide you through that. So we've definitely seen a lot of momentum there. We're actually working with a mortgage company now who was seeing a lot of drop off of their loan applications, both refinancing, student loans, and a bunch of other ones like that. And even though they want to be chat and chat is the future, they're phone today, but they really needed like a standalone solution that they could leverage to make that a better experience. So now they're able to actually guide the end user through it. And again, really just be there through a co-browsing technology. And I think that's really important because for them, I think, for a lot of people, it's about cost savings and reducing handle time. But if you look at that online use case, it's more about conversion. And that's even more exciting because at the end of the day, it's not about cost savings, but it's revenue generating, which is really exciting. And in fact, by leveraging a tool like CoBrowse, you can close more loans in less time and perhaps more loans that you wouldn't have closed otherwise. Because before they were seeing a lot of drop off and abandonments on their site and people started to fill it out. They got frustrated. They didn't know, where to go and download the bank statement and upload it and things like that. So I think it's exciting to not just be like a cost savings tool, but some people who are leveraging this, again, they're not measuring handle time. They don't care about that. It's about the experience. It's about closing more applications in less time. So that's been pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, that's a great example too of where it goes back to just getting closer to the customer and closer to where the customer's challenges are or pain points are. And I also like this too because there are things that for a company are highly repeatable in the sense of if you're a mortgage company, you're going through the mortgage process hundreds of times a day. But if you're the end user, people don't do if they might only do one mortgage in their entire lifetime. And so how do you bring the expert closer to the person who needs the help? And I think your point's a great one of one, we're now doing that at scale because we have a tool that allows for us to connect quickly, get our eyes on what they're working on. But two, we're doing that in a way that reduces the effort by the customer. And then, in turn, hopefully that helps them to buy faster or buy more. And so I really like that as an example of, we're taking things that maybe are hard for the user and putting tools in our employees' hands and the customer's hands that make it easy. And then once again, that can drive things like top line revenue, can drive happier customers, repeat customers. So I think those are all great examples that you've brought up. Marie, I don't know if there's any other examples you want to touch on briefly that we've seen, success in the world of visual engagement.
Yeah, I think one area, and Kat touched on this a little bit with co-browsing, that, rather than just a support experience, something that is actually a revenue generating experience, but somewhere in the middle, it's the onboarding of a new customer, right? So if you think about online software, the ability for someone to get more value out of their software purchase and have those customer-facing teams that can offer more how-to guidance and have customers learn by doing versus many software companies are like, here's a video, have at it. Really that how to get your hands on the product so that they get richer experience. It helps them to learn the technology so that they can really make it their own. And ultimately, it can reduce further calls into their support center down the line. And most importantly, retain them much longer. So I think it's an important opportunity to look at is just how co-browsing can help with the customer onboarding.
Yeah, that's another great example. And it also goes back to this kind of recurring theme we're seeing around places that are challenging for the customer that we want to make easy. We want to get our experts' eyes on what they're doing. And it could be that, there's admin things or setup items or new features. So it's how are you getting your experts closer to the customer, but doing it in this remote world? So I think that's another wonderful example. So a couple of things I want to touch on before we wrap up our time today. And just a quick channel check here for anybody that's joined partway through. This is CXNext Live. It's a weekly series we do focused on the world of customer experience, helping you better understand trends, address core challenges, learn from industry experts. This week, we're focused on the world of visual engagement. So talking about how visual engagement's helping us to address many of the challenges we're seeing in the way we work and support our customers in a COVID-19 world. Joining me is Kat and Marie. Kat's focused on our product team, building these capabilities to help folks like you out there. And Maria is part of our product marketing team, who's done some really great research, primary market research with partners like Forrester on better understanding the needs and applications for visual engagement. We've been talking through some of the core challenges that are coming out of COVID-19 and why visual engagement is relevant. We've been talking through some specific examples in the world of telco, financial services, technical support, field service support. And now we're going to spend a little bit of time. I'm interested in, I think we've talked a lot about how this can make things better and how it can improve the customer experience. But I'm also interested in talking about, how does this overall provide better support and service? Are there things that specifically it's making a lot better in the world of service and support? And it could be things around maybe security or trust or, getting closer to the customer. So I'd like to talk through those topics a bit. Kat, why don't you start? Are there some things kind of at a broader perspective that visual engagement brings to the world of customer service and support?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say at the end of the day, research shows that most people's experience with a brand starts on a website. So you're really only like a click away from a co-browse session. But
Yes.
If you take that one step further, if you think about it, there's a lot of people today that might be struggling with relatively simple issues, and you could have the most intuitive website in the world. And obviously self-service is everything, and the ROI there is proven. Deflection, that's great. But again, once you get past that, how are you enabling your agents to handle the more complex issues? So I think when you think about service, again, sometimes it's break fix, sometimes it's not even traditional support. And again, it might be something as simple as you're logging into your telco and you're trying to update your data plan and you're not really sure where to do that and how to do that. So I think it's really important because what we're really calling this is agent-assisted self-service, because again, there's different types of self-service. And I think we're definitely seeing a need for that type of support. It's obviously not really technical troubleshooting support. It's lighter weight. It's more service, technical stuff. But at the end of the day, it's helping your customer navigate your website and getting them what they need in a timely manner. And as Marie pointed to earlier, I think this is really, not only does this help the customer within that situation, but also if you consider like long-term ROI, really enabling them so that they're more likely to self-serve in the future, as opposed to encouraging them to continue to call in for relatively simple issues, because a lot of these agents are doing it within back office because it's so painful today to try to describe, okay, go to the left side of the page, you see that icon, and they're not seeing it. So I think a lot of times we just get frustrated and we just go to back office and do it. But again, that's really a missed opportunity in terms of really giving the customer the tools to do that in the future.
Yeah, there's two things I like that you touched on there. The one I can certainly relate to. We've all done this where we're like trying to describe, even when we're sitting next to someone, we're trying to describe how to do something. And then you're like, you start pointing on the screen and you start touching the screen to be like, no, here. So there's very much that like, the physical guidance, the visual guidance of helping someone. But then I think I also really want to reinforce that point around the effort. And it's not just the effort for the customer, but also the effort for the employee. Even things like, if you're having a physical phone call and someone gets routed to you, once again, all the context and effort of being like, oh, what screen are you on? What does it show? Oh, do you see this button? Do you see this field? All of that is eliminated because now immediately the person has context of, oh, I see the page you're on. I see where your mouse is. I see the fields you filled out. So now all that extra overhead, that work that every contact center person or every support person or every service person has had to deal with their entire career, all that's gone because now they see literally what the person's doing, and they can guide them much faster and much more efficiently. So I think that's a really strong point that I think we probably can't hammer enough, of that reduction in effort by both the employee and by the customer. So that's a great point. Marie, is there anything else for you that you think is kind of a broader outcome of leveraging visual engagement?
Yeah, I think, and I talked about this earlier, that how important trust is. But I think visual engagement does a couple of things here. It really does create more of that trusted environment where in a world today where we are socially distant, people are a little fragile to some extent. So my bandwidth for being patient has like shrunk dramatically. So both as a parent, a professional, and just an individual being. So I think that trust, that intimacy, and that empathy that can come with a visual engagement tool that literally makes it feel like someone's with you, like physically, virtually present though, that can stand shoulder to shoulder and walk you through what's going on, what the situation is. And to your point, like cutting through all the upfront baggage of how did we get to where your problem is?
Yes.
I think that's critical, because I think those are the moments that customers will remember. They will stick with them over time and make them advocates for your brand in the long run. And I think all of that gets down to the heart of the matter. Social distancing or not, the customer experience is the battleground for businesses today. It's not price, it's not product, it's service and experience. And the more that businesses can lean in and get closer to the customer, I think the more that they'll benefit and in the long run there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Especially in a world where we are so concerned about every customer we have, and every company's worried about churn and retaining their customers. I think you've said it really well. Yeah, the one anecdote I'll give you is that there actually have been challenges during COVID-19 of people just calling into contact centers just to have somebody to talk to. And so people want that human feeling. It's the reality of things. Like, some people are stuck at home by themselves for months. So I think that you're spot on that, the more we can make it more human, more empathetic, putting ourselves once again in the consumer's shoes, the better we're all going to be. So I think that's a wonderful point. So I know we've run short on time here. It was a great conversation. I'm sure people out there are looking for potentially more information. So Marie, staying with you, what are some other resources we have that people can check out to learn more?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So as I mentioned earlier today and have talked about it a lot, we commissioned a study with Forrester to really understand more about the impact visual engagement tools can have on the customer experience. So that research is available today. And it's a really great thought leadership piece of content for people to understand how other CX leaders are evaluating and adopting visual engagement technology. I also was fortunate enough to spend some time with Kate Leggett, the key analyst at Forrester Research, on a webinar earlier this week to talk about some of the data coming out of that report. So that on-demand broadcast is available as well. And then for folks that are looking to understand, like, is visual engagement right for me and my business? We created a really lightweight interactive tool to help you understand based on, are you more concerned with customer experience or operational metrics? What parts of your customer journey are you looking to improve? We've created this really lightweight interactive guide to help you understand whether different types of visual engagement technologies might be right for you. So I would definitely encourage audiences to take a look into those assets. And then I think finally, we have a demo experience. So if you're interested in learning more about our co-browsing technology, Rescue Live Guide, or our camera streaming technology, Rescue Live Lens, there are demo pages that you could go visit today, learn a little bit more about the product, and request to have someone create a personalized demo for you.
Yeah, that's great. And I know Kat's certainly excited about that. They've worked very hard on these products, these capabilities, and I know they're very proud to showcase them. So I'm sure she's excited for people to go check that out and get a great demo and see how this is relevant to their specific uses or challenges. So I want to thank you both for joining. This is a really great discussion. Sounds like we have a lot of great additional resources for folks out there. So Kat, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
And Marie, thank you for all your insights as well.
Thanks, glad to be here.
And for all of you out there, really appreciate you joining our weekly series CXNext Live. Tune back in for more information on the world of customer experience. We have some great guests coming up over the next few weeks. We'll be talking to some financial services companies, some folks that are in more of the digital transformation realm. So we'll be having a lot of great guests over the next few weeks. So please feel free to check back in. These are recorded, so feel free to share them. And once again, as always, post questions, bring up topics you're looking for us to deep dive on further. And we're here to help you on your digital transformation and your customer experience journey. So thank you again for joining. We look forward to future conversations. Please take care of yourselves, be well, and look forward to future conversations around customer experience. Thanks so much. Take care.